Hey folks, today's the day we're going to begin the hardening off process for some of our tomatoes. And here before you see 4 with the basil on each end. And about to begin the hardening off process. It's a little bit unique for back to Eden growers, certainly growers that grow their plants like I do in a deep bed of wood chips and compost. I'm going to give you some tips. Alright, so hang on here. So right here in the foreground, you can see a small plant, a basil plant. It's going to be one of the companions that sits at each end of this single row of tomatoes. And got some beefsteaks right here that I'm going to be introducing to the soil for the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little tiny shovel like this, and I'm going to form a hole right here in the coarsest chips. These are the chips that I laid out last fall to regenerate what was essentially consumed and used and processed in the previous season. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove a small amount, go slightly lower into the soil profile until we get into some of the richer, more mature soils, and the bottom of the pot is going to sit there. It's going to be a little bit chilly tonight, so I'm going to let them sit in this position overnight. They're essentially married into the soil, and the next step will be to, allow them to become acclimated to the temperatures and the climatology a little bit at a time over the next few days. After which, I'll go ahead and I'll remove the bottom of the pail, separate it from it, and form a deeper hole, and I'll bury them in the ground. But for now, it's just a couple of tips I want to share with y'all. One of the things that I like to do as I introduce them to the outside world, they were previously in the greenhouse, now they're out here, is prune off any sort of leaves on the plant. Inspect your leaves, look at the tops, look at the bottoms, make sure that you can see if there's any fruit happening already, like it's typical for me since I start so early. You want to look at the fruit, see how it's doing. I've got some flowers, we'll go ahead and make sure they're pollinated now. Up over here, there's a ladybug attached, so I know that they're in good care. But if there's any decaying leaves, I'm just going to go ahead and use my scissors, small gardening scissors, to clip that off and set that off to the side to be composted later. So if there's anything that we don't want to convey to the soil in place that might be on the leaf as it decays, we can send it to a composting area and it'll be safe there. Outside of that, I just want to make mention of the fact that that's easier to do when the plant is on the table or higher up. If you're getting up in the years, you probably want to make as many uses of those tables as you can before you get down to this level, and try to spend as little time down here as you can, just so you remain comfortable. And simple tips, simple things that you learn over the years. A lot of tomato growers talk about elevating their stem and removing any of the leaf growth or stem or branch growth that's down there. And that's not a terrible practice. But one thing I like to mention on that subject is I use a lot of compost teas. You all know, you've seen them in those videos before. What I like to do is I like to remove any of that vegetative matter that doesn't need to be there if we're going to bury it deeper, or if it looks like it's maybe doesn't need to be part of the plant anymore. It'll come off, and you're exposing the plant to some tiny little wounds where you used your scissors or popped off a horizontal branch. And what I like to do is apply a little bit of compost tea with some of the indigenous indigenous organisms, that I know have already been cultured well to my area, and make up a tea with that, and then I apply it to the plant. And those organisms then populate rather than other organisms that might seek to make my plants sick. So with those complementary compost teas, I think that they're very plant protective. And if you're a new grower and you're really not involved in this process of growing for very long, they really can sort of catapult your growing to the next level pretty quickly if you do find a liking for those things. Compost teas, in particular the aerobic type that I like to use for my plants, are fairly simple to make, and there's plenty of videos out there, plenty of coaches out there willing to teach you how to do it. But I want to take you to the next step. We inspected our fruit, we inspected our leaves, we like what we see. It looks like it's been handled very gently. The plant is doing well. There really wasn't very much leaf matter that needed to come off of this, and there wasn't even a whole lot to elevate, because it's possible that that may have happened in a previous step, or when it was up potted from the small planter pot into the next size pot, into the next size pot. This right here to me looks like it's probably my 3rd pot, and that's because we plant so early, and I like to manage this growth through the winter It gives me roots to manage. It gives me plants to manage. It really is very peaceful for me. So I have the space to do what I do it. Anyway, before I run out of any of my own mouth moisture, I'm going to show you what the next step is. With my little scoopy shovel, you might have a different kind. I just sort of cut out a little hole, bringing these chips that I laid in last fall up to the outside just a bit. And at some point you get deep enough to where you're either at your native earth or you're at the compost layer, if you were fortunate enough to have a compost layer. And that becomes the best place to marry your plants. And when I do this pretty much with the express intent to get my plant associated with the soils. In this case, they're native soils. And the roots that are in here are all healthy and actively living and growing. And many of them share symbiotic relationships with the plants that I place here. In this particular case, I'm placing this one. You know, if you need a little bit more space, you can sort of chisel out the side. In this case, I have grapes right next to it. And if I inadvertently prune the roots of the grapes will ultimately end up thanking me. They respond well to pruning. Pruning is one of the finest ways to instigate growth. And, well, you need new shoots if you want grapes. And there you have it. So now I'm going to take this media right here, which as you can see is pretty coarse, but there's some broken down stuff in it. I'm just going to bring it up against the sunny side, sort of embellishing that concept of shading the root out. That's going to keep this from drying out quickly. It's also going to hold this form, so when the temperature, or if the temperature drops suddenly tonight or tomorrow night, I can actually pop this out and the shape of the hole will remain. It's almost genius. I didn't invent this. For now, that reinforcement keeps the winds from blowing the plant over. We've grown big here, folks. What can I say? I want to tell you something else, folks. Everybody's going to grow with different issues. It's important to note that they impact our plants essentially the same. So we can see commonality from one garden to another between the way the plants behave. And it allows us to suspect different situations that are impacting plant health. One of the things that I like to use to quantify plant health is the rate at which it grows, the amount of chlorophyll and the color of the plant, and also its resistance to the natural predation of the local insect population. My tomatoes do that really well, but they don't go unpredated, folks. The insects love my plants, but the insects don't hurt my plants. The insects exist around me. They're ubiquitous, meaning they're all around me. They're sewn into the ecology, but they're not hurting my plants because my plants are healthy. And if I was to come out here and just bury this tomato plant in the soil and then walk away and the temperature drops suddenly to 43 degrees, I can pretty much be sure to come out here to see a yellowish, purplish, almost reddish cooked plant in the next couple of days. It's going to interrupt the plant's growth cycle because I was unable to care for it when it got cold. This allows me to very quickly respond to the shift in temperatures here and the shift in climatology and run them into the greenhouses for protection. It's not too much work. It's really not. I mean, look, folks, what is there here? 6 plants? That's not that much. It's not too much. More often than not, I'll manage 60 plants. So this is nothing. And these are my favorite plants. So I want to care for them as best as I can. So to do this for each one of them down the row, it's nothing. I got this. You got this. It doesn't take a lot of time. You can probably think of better ways to make the hole than I just did. You know, maybe if you have a replacement size bucket made out of tin or metal, you could cut the bottom off of it somehow and just wiggle it into the ground and remove what's loose. I don't know, depending on what your interests are. I myself am not trying to get in the garden and get out of it and run out of it because good things happen in here. My health is fantastic because of here and this relationship. I hope y'all can maybe take some of that into yourself and make some sense of it. So it's not something you run into and then run out of and expect to get great results. My plants look like this because I care for them. Make sense? And I'm trying to work on their behalf every step of the way. Sometimes that involves me not getting in the way and letting nature take over and do its thing. And more often than not, the natural method also turns out to be the easiest method. You step into gardening, there's just no way that you'll ever think that you have the wisdom to achieve that train of thought, but it's just not true. The garden makes the grower. It's not the other way around. Not in my mind. I mean, really. Take your time. Don't get discouraged because you make a mistake or two. Plant another seed. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, and Mr. Paul taught me well, is more often than not, if I have a plant in the ground and I plant a baby seed next to it, that baby seed begins to take life from the plant. Shared, symbiotic, mutually supportive life from that host or mother plant. And then the seed eventually grows into a giant plant. So the garden will teach you what works and what doesn't work if you pay attention and you listen and look and feel long enough. Don't take my word for it. Get out in there. Put some sunblock on if you need to. Wear a wide-brimmed hat. I'm soaking it up right now because it's gorgeous out right now. And I want to get all the rays I can, just like my plants. They got their leaves up. They're just looking for this rays of sunshine, and they're basking in it, and everything is going right for them right now because the days that led up to this were done with care. All right, enough of that. Y'all learned quite a bit already. You know that we companion with basil because basil does what? It smells, and what those smells do is they attract or detract. They work in a synergistic way to help protect the plant. They also produce really pretty flowers that attract a lot of pollinators. So having one on each end covers me when the wind is blowing this way and when the wind is blowing that way. Either way, we're going to mix up these scents. These aromatics are natural. The insects will take note and they will come here for these. And like I said before, there's already a ladybug on that one hanging out on the bottom of the leaf, protecting herself from the sun. She's probably feasting on some small insect. They're here for a reason. It could be said that some of these small insects may have been pollinating my plants. Give that some thought the next time you decide to spray them down with soap or abolish everything within arm's reach of you. Long-term success is largely based on how well you learn to adhere to Mother Nature's principles, not your own, and certainly not those of mankind, because nobody does green plants better than Mother Nature. And all I'm trying to do is imitate what she does right here, providing, caring, and sharing, one step at a time. So if you like what you saw, if any of these tips resonate with you, if you like my tips about companion plants and pruning your tomato before you put it in the ground, if you like my tips about giving it a temporary home, then you're really going to like it when you find out that you realize this isn't the best place for your tomato in 2 days, and you can still move it. All right, that's enough. Y'all have had enough Creedmoor Fury for 1 week anyway. Peace, love to everybody. God bless. And if you haven't already, please click the like, please click the subscribe, please click the share. And if there's a bell thingy there somewhere, I don't know where it is, go ahead and ring that bell too, so that the next time I get out in the garden and start ranting about beautiful plants that you can't argue with, you'll get a notification. And you can come hang out with me in my gardens or in my vineyard doing some cool stuff. Fair enough? Cool. Peace.